The terrifying case of the Watseka living ghost. America's first documented possession. If stories like this disturb you, make sure you subscribe before the next one finds you first. On a freezing January morning in 1877, the quiet town of Watseka, Illinois, woke to the sound of frantic knocking on the Venom family's door. Inside, 13-year-old Laurency Venom had collapsed again, her body stiff, her eyes open but unfocused, whispering words no one could understand. Neighbors said they heard her speaking in different tones through the walls, sometimes calm, sometimes trembling, as though more than one person was trapped inside her small frame. The doctor who examined her offered no diagnosis. To him, it was simply another nervous fit, a term used when nothing made sense. But to the townspeople watching her that morning, something far stranger was happening. Laurency's episodes grew worse by the week. She claimed to leave her body for long stretches of time, describing distant places she had never visited and people she had never met. Her parents listened helplessly as she spoke about bright spirits guiding her or dark ones standing near her bed. Witnesses said Laurency's voice and demeanor shifted so dramatically that it felt like a different person was sitting in front of them. The family tried doctors, pastors, and even isolation, but nothing eased the episodes. Instead, the trances deepened, and the conversations she seemed to hold with unseen presences became more detailed. Then, during one of her longest unconscious spells, Laurency suddenly sat upright and introduced herself, not as Laurency, but as Mary Roff, a girl who had died 12 years earlier in the same town. She spoke calmly, even kindly, telling her parents she didn't belong in this house and wanted to go back to her real family. When questioned further, she described the interior of the Roff home with unsettling accuracy. The placement of furniture, the names of neighbors, the locations of family belongings that Laurency had no way of knowing. Word spread quickly across Watseka, drawing neighbors to the Venom home in disbelief. But the most shocking moment came when the Roff family themselves arrived, and the girl who looked nothing like their Mary greeted them with recognition in her eyes. And that was only the beginning. The room fell silent as the Roff family stepped closer. Dr. and Mrs. Roff, who had lived through the grief of losing their daughter, stood frozen while the girl before them, Laurency, yet somehow not, smiled softly and called them by name. Witnesses later said the atmosphere shifted instantly, as if everyone could feel something they didn't have the words for. Mrs. Roff broke down first, trembling as the girl described Mary's old bedroom, the stitching on her favorite quilt, and the locket she once wore. These were private details the Venoms couldn't possibly know. Even more unsettling, she asked about family members long dead, recalling conversations Mary had before her passing. The Roffs begged to take her home, insisting that if this was truly Mary, or even part of her, she would be calmer with them. After days of debate, the Venoms agreed. On the morning of her departure, Laurency, still calling herself Mary, packed belongings with a familiarity that left her siblings stunned. She left the Venom house without looking back, walking beside the Roffs as though she had always belonged to them. And according to reports, her demeanor changed the moment she crossed their threshold. Her posture relaxed, her speech steadied. For the first time in months, she seemed peaceful. What followed over the next several weeks astonished everyone who witnessed it. The girl recognized neighbors Mary had known, recalling stories from years before Laurency was even born. She asked about old disputes, childhood friends, and family milestones. She moved through the house confidently, opening drawers and cabinets to retrieve items without hesitation. Physicians who had documented her behavior described her transition as too complete, too natural to be imitation. It was as though Laurency had stepped aside, allowing someone else to take her place. Yet beneath the calm surface, something unsettling remained. While she appeared to be Mary, There were moments, brief, flickering moments, when she would pause mid-sentence, her expression tightening as though something within her was struggling. Witnesses described it as if two identities were pressing against each other, neither fully in control. And then, late one evening, the peace shattered. A neighbor heard a scream from the Roth house, sharp, sudden, and unlike anything they had heard before. What they found inside would force the town to reconsider everything they believed. The neighbor who heard the scream ran across the snow-covered yard and pounded on the Roth family's door until Mrs. Roth opened it, pale and trembling. Inside, the house felt colder than the winter air. The girl, Laurency or Mary, no one was sure in that moment, was sitting on the parlor floor, her hands clutched tightly around her head. Her breathing was sharp and uneven, and she kept repeating, "Not yet, not yet," in a voice that was neither the soft, familiar tone of Mary nor the frightened voice of Laurency. It was something in between, something strained. The Roths tried to comfort her, but she pushed their hands away, insisting someone was calling her. When they asked who, she whispered, "She wants to come back." Dr. Stevens, who had been documenting the case, arrived minutes later. He attempted to speak to her calmly, asking whether she felt ill or confused. Instead of answering, the girl suddenly looked directly at him with Laurency's own eyes, clear, frightened, and unmistakably aware. "Where am I?" she asked, trembling. "This isn't my house." The shift happened so quickly that even the skeptical physician stepped back. But as soon as her parents were called for, her voice broke again and slipped back into Mary's tone. The transitions were becoming more frequent, more forceful, as though both identities were beginning to fight for control. For days, this struggle continued. One moment she laughed gently with the Roths, recalling Mary's childhood memories. The next, she clutched her arms and cried for her own mother. Mrs. Roth recorded that Laurency would sometimes plead, "Don't leave me alone in the dark," though she never explained what darkness she meant. The Venoms visited often, witnessing the disturbing shifts themselves. The girl who had lived in their home for years seemed to drift further away, returning only in fragments. Then came the night that changed everything. While sitting by the fireplace, she abruptly froze, staring into the flames as if recognizing something concealed within them. Her voice lowered, quiet but certain. "It's time," she said. "She wants her life back." Moments later, her body collapsed to the floor. And when she opened her eyes again, the town would never see the same girl. When the girl opened her eyes, the room fell silent. The Roths leaned closer, afraid to speak. Dr. Stevens checked her pulse, expecting another trance, but she gently pulled her hand away. Her expression was different, calmer, older somehow, as if she had returned from a long journey. She looked around the room slowly, studying each face as though seeing them for the first time. Mrs. Roth whispered her name, "Mary." But the girl shook her head. Her voice, soft and trembling, answered, "I don't know where I've been." It was Laurency's voice, clear, familiar, and exhausted. For hours, she remained quiet, asking only simple questions. How she had arrived there, how long she had been gone, and why she felt so heavy, as though she had been carrying someone else's memories. Dr. Stevens questioned her carefully, testing whether the Mary persona would return, but Laurency seemed present in a way she hadn't been for months. She spoke of strange dreams, of walking through bright fields and dark rooms, of hearing a girl begging her not to be afraid. She remembered none of the visits, conversations, or months spent in the Roth home. Still, the physicians and witnesses hesitated. This case had changed direction before. They watched her closely over the next days, documenting every shift in mood or tone. But instead of slipping back into trances, Laurency grew stronger. She ate meals with the family, walked through town without confusion, and even wrote letters home asking to see her siblings. Whatever had held her seemed to be fading, releasing her piece by piece. One detail deeply unsettled the investigators. When Mrs. Roff showed her a drawer of Mary's belongings, hoping to trigger a lapse, Laurency stared at them thoughtfully and said, "These feel familiar, but not mine, like someone showed them to me in a dream." She recognized nothing specifically, yet she handled each item with just strange tenderness, as if touched by an emotion she couldn't name. But peace in the Roff household didn't come easily. Late one evening, as Dr. Roff prepared to return Laurency to her family, she stopped at the doorway and whispered, "If she comes back, please don't let her stay." No one knew who she meant, and no one asked. The next morning, the final test of her identity would leave the entire town divided forever. The final test came on a cold February morning, when the Venom family gathered at the Roff home to bring their daughter back. Witnesses later recorded how the air felt tense, as though something unseen was waiting in the space between the two families. Laurency stepped forward cautiously, her eyes flicking from one face to another. For the first time in months, she ran into her mother's arms without hesitation. Mrs. Venom cried openly, whispering prayers of relief. Dr. Stevens, watching closely for any break in her expression, noted that she showed none of the confusion or fragmented identity that had marked her earlier months. She appeared simply present. But a final question remained. The town wanted certainty, proof that Laurency was truly herself again. Dr. Roff suggested they ask her something only Mary would know. The room fell quiet. Laurency looked puzzled, not fearful, as if waiting to understand the purpose of the test. Mrs. Roff gently asked her about a hidden keepsake Mary had treasured, a small ribbon tucked behind a loose floorboard in her old bedroom. Laurency frowned, shook her head, and apologized for not knowing what they meant. To the Roffs, this was both heartbreaking and clarifying. The girl in front of them was not Mary, and for the first time since the case began, they allowed themselves to accept it. Over the following weeks, Laurency's recovery continued. The trances stopped entirely. Her memory returned to normal, and she spent time with friends she had barely recognized before. She spoke occasionally about dreams of a bright, kind girl who watched over her, but she never again adopted another identity. Dr. Stevens documented her progress meticulously, noting her remarkable shift from the most extreme symptoms to complete normalcy. The Roff family visited her often, grateful for the gentle months they believed Mary had been near them again, even if only in spirit or memory. When the case was later reviewed, experts debated endlessly. Some called it a medical anomaly, others a psychological phenomenon far ahead of its time. A few insisted it was something else, something beyond explanation. But no conclusion ever satisfied everyone. Laurency married years later and lived a quiet life. She never experienced another episode, and the town of Watseka was left with a single question that no witness, physician, or historian ever answered. Who, or what, truly returned to that family during the winter of 1877? If this true story unsettled you, there are many more still waiting in the shadows.